Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about how in just 2 weeks, right near the end, about 4 or 5 months before Fallout shipped, we replaced GURPS with Special. Now this isn't going to be a video about why we had to do that. That's another video, maybe, if I ever feel like talking about that. But what I want to talk about is how we managed to replace such an integral part of what you would think would be a game so quickly. And there's really two reasons for that I'll get into, but they were that Chris Taylor, our lead designer, already had several homebrew systems, and he had one that looked really good. And I'll tell you what that was and how we integrated it. And then the other reason we could replace the system mechanics so quickly was the nature of how Fallout came to be. And I know I've talked, and you may have read other places, that Fallout started very small, just me, and then I was really championing GURPS. So let me talk about both of those. First, the engine. I made several different engines, just playing around. A lot on my own time. I made a voxel engine, 3D pixels. They were really hot in the 90s. I made a 3D engine, and it was awful. And then John Price, programmer, came on board and made a really awesome 3D engine for the Star Trek games. So I went with the sprite engine that I made. At the same time, I had started playing GURPS before I even came to Interplay. I played back in grad school. So by the time I started Interplay, it had been 4 years. And I had made, because I played GURPS Space a lot, I had made a tool called the GURPS Star System Generator. You can probably still find it out there. It would generate a sector of the galaxy according to rules in the GURPS Space rulebook. And you could click on the different stars in the UI, and it would tell you what the planets were. You click on each planet, it would tell you information about that. And I had fun making that. So when I started introducing GURPS to fellow players, and I've told some of those stories in my other video about why I like flawed characters, we would play all kinds of different GURPS. That's what was the advantage of GURPS. We would play GURPS Fantasy and GURPS Space and GURPS Time Travel. We had one campaign where I said they could use any of the books they wanted. And I called that GURPS Everything. And that was a hilarious campaign. I should talk about that at some point. Chris and Taylor and Scott Everett's had two of the funniest characters. I also tried playing one where you weren't allowed to use anything, no magic, no psionics, and only the very most rudimentary skills and advantages and disadvantages from the basic set. We call that GURPS Nothing. While I was doing all this, other groups started spinning up and playing their own sessions of GURPS. And they said, the character editor, or the character creation is a little complex, especially when you had to tell people you can use these advantages, but not these, and these skills, but not these. So what I did was I made a GURPS character editor. And to help support all these different GURPS sessions that were going on, it was completely modular. So the skills, the advantages, the disadvantages were all done in text modules that anyone could edit. And you could, when you started at the editor, you're like, I'm going to use these files for advantages and disadvantages and skills. And then I even made attributes into one because I'm like, well, everything else has a module. I'll just make attributes a module and be done with it. People loved it. There were a whole bunch of campaigns going on. Scott Campbell, the original lead designer of Fallout, made a GURPS vehicle editor. That's how into GURPS we were. So that was probably around 92, 93. So flash forward 3 or 4 years. We made Fallout with the sprite engine. GURPS was put into Fallout as modules. So in the middle of the combat system, it would say, this guy attacked this guy. What's his chance to hit? And it would say, well, how far away are they? What item are they using? What are their skills, attributes, whatever. But that was all tucked away in library calls. So when the call came to like, hey, we may be replacing GURPS, how long would it take to do this? I met with Chris. And Chris Taylor said, I have a really cool system I want to talk to you about. Give me 2 days. So I spent those 2 days looking at the code and how everything was isolated into the libraries. And I assisted that a little. I found a few things that weren't quite so isolated, and I tried to clean those up. I got most of them. I probably didn't get all of them. Then a couple days later, Chris came to my office, and he presented his system. And I remember it was attributes, traits, and skills. The attributes were strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, and agility. It was everything but luck. It was specia. The traits were a combination of advantages and disadvantages, and that solved a problem we were currently having where when you GM'd a GURPS campaign, you would often tell players they weren't allowed to take certain disadvantages together. Like if you were already blind, you couldn't take color blindness. In our Fallout version, we had to mark them as mutually exclusive. Sometimes if you had these two, then you couldn't take this one. What we ended up doing was just, Chris's idea of putting advantages and disadvantages together in a trait got rid of any need for that. You just took no trait or one trait or two traits and you were done. And the skills were a really good selection of skills that we could easily just redirect the calls from going to GURPS modules to going into this new game system skill module. My suggestion at the time, though, is I said I really, really want luck because I'd had some really good experiences with luck, especially in GURPS Supers, with buying ridiculous luck and phenomenal luck. And so we put that in. We did two things. We sent it up the chain and we presented it to the team. I don't know if we got any feedback from anyone but Brian Fargo, but his suggestion, and all he said was, when you go up a level in this new system, I don't think it's enough just to buy skills. I want to be able to buy something else. And Chris went, what if we put back in sort of advantages? They weren't quite the same. But because there are no disadvantages, there was nothing we had to worry about balancing there. And also we're restricting it to you buy it every third level. Chris made a bunch of perk trees. They were really good. Brian loved it. When we presented the system to the team, they really liked it. They thought it solved some other problems we were having that I won't get into here, but some things we weren't sure how to solve that were coming up in testing. However, after the meeting, one of the team members, Jason Swin, came up to me and he goes, Tim, you presented it and you called it A-slips, the first letter of all the attributes. I was looking at that and I think you could rearrange them into a better word, special. And I was like, oh, Jason, I don't know, special has some negative connotations. Let me think about it. I don't have to tell you. By the next day, I was like, okay, A-slips is out, special's in. And the rest is history. And if there's two lessons to learn from this, it is that Chris Taylor did a whole bunch of heavy lifting, making a whole new system in days based on his homebrew system. And thank goodness for modular programming. It saved the day. So that's the story of Fallout's special system. I still call it A-slips occasionally.